Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and we got a big news day, but there's more to come. So there's a big set of patch notes with class balance and tuning and stuff coming to this week's War Within beta build. If you're interested, there's already a video up on several hours ago now, a day ago or something, on the affix changes, which are the bombshell news from today. But let's dive into these beta notes as well, because there's some important stuff in here too. Starting off with a change to Avoidance and Leech, which is that in today's build, Avoidance and Leech rating on gear give half as much percent as before, and we've reduced the amount of these stats given by most talents. Both of them, Avoidance in particular, are extremely effective against the damage non-tank players face. By the end of an expansion, the amount of Avoidance appearing on gear reduces so much damage that acquiring pieces with it can feel required to do the hardest content, particularly extremely high Mythic Plus keys. By reducing the amount of value given per rating, our goal is for pieces with those stats to remain valuable, but for the gap between players with and without them to be closer. And so they're nerfing the amount of Avoidance and Leech you get per point of rating by 50%, which means basically for somebody to have as much of avoidance as they used to have by having 2 avoidance pieces, now they need 4 avoidance pieces. You know, 1, they need 2, right? Like that's sort of the way this works out. And they've also gutted all of the, class and spec tree nodes that grant Avoidance and Leech. They've taken these down by a little bit less than half in most cases, usually by about 40%, 30%, depending on what exactly the number was. But that's what they've done to Avoidance and Leech. So my take on this is, I think this is probably good. Those stats were really OP, and in some cases, seriously worth sacrificing item levels for. Reducing the value you get per point makes that less true. It makes it less likely to be something you're going to be interested in doing, right? You're going to be less interested in sacrificing, say, 6 item levels for Avoidance on a piece, 6 item levels for Leech. You may still be interested in doing that. There may certainly still be cases where you need some Avoidance to live a certain mechanic and a certain key. And in some cases, you could maybe argue that players would feel obligated to, buy 3 Avoidance BOEs instead of 1 or 2 or something like that. I don't think that... I think that that doesn't make that much sense, because the more powerful version of Avoidance, I think, would be more worth, spending more gold on to do that. But you could maybe make that argument if there's a certain mechanic, there's very pass-fail, right? A binary, you either live this with Avoidance or you die without type thing, that now people are going to go a little bit more out of their way to get it. But I tend to think that's not a super realistic fear for this. I think this is probably just a good nerf to tertiaries that are extremely powerful, and they should still feel reasonably good to be on gear. There's a certain point where if you nerf these enough that they're nerfing them more for balance makes it a less exciting thing to proc on your gear, right? And I think they will still feel good at half value. I think that is probably fair. So yeah, I guess overall I think this is probably pretty good change. All right, DK. So this particular beta tuning build comes with a lot of these sorts of lines here where they're buffing or nerfing the damage of a bunch of abilities. We're not going to read too much into these. There are a few spots where it's like, oh, wow, this ability is getting a 100% buff. This ability is only getting a 5% buff, like this type of thing. Cost reductions, those sorts of things. But for the most part, we're just going to focus on the other notes, which, starting off, we've got Ice Cap. Now crits with Obliterate and Frost Strike no longer reduce Ice Cap cooldown. Now grants 15-second cooldown for Pillar of Frost. Spending runes no longer increases the strength bonus of Pillar of Frost. So rethinking what this is going to look like, Pillar of Frost no longer having a sort of ramping identity to it. Enduring Strength's bonus is being nerfed, and the functionality that they added in the last build to make Obliteration increase Frost Strike's runic power and damage has been removed as well. So they're back to the drawing board on that one. And they've nerfed Murderous Efficiency's rune chance generation. So a little bit of nerfs, I'd say, across these parts, and then flat buffs to the spec overall here. These sorts of flat buffs and stuff, there are often some pretty large swings for this, and this seems to be the beta build where they're really starting to move into trying to actually get all the classes closer together. But note that is going to take some time, right? Like, they're going to calibrate each week. They're going to be smaller and smaller buffs and nerfs until they get them all nice and close together. But still, as of right now, there are likely to be some very big outliers in this beta build. DH, we don't have much here. We just have a buff to Art of the Glaive. You're going to be able to proc Reaver's Glaive at 30 soul fragments now, so a little bit more often. Not a fundamental change to this hero talent tree, which, in my opinion, is should be one of the higher priority hero talent trees for a rethink, is Eldrachi Reaver. I think that one's got some annoying play patterns that at least Havoc Demon Hunters have been telling me about. I haven't played too much Havoc myself on beta, but it seems pretty unpopular among that community, so I could be wrong about that. I've only had a few of that I talked to, so if you're a Havoc Demon Hunter, Yeah, let me know in the comments what you think about Eldrazi Reaver if you played it on beta, but that's what I've heard so far. Druid. Connectors repositioned to avoid a scenario where improved Stampeding Roar could be taken without Stampeding Roar. This is the Dorky build. Dorky played an improved Stampeding Roar build without Stampeding Roar, and now they're going to stop people from being able to commit that particular blunder. They've also swapped Fluid Form and Forest Walk. The Druid class tree is still in a position of extreme point tension and extreme connector awkwardness, where it's very hard to feel like you have any optional talent points and you get to make any interesting choices, because the stuff you're giving up just feels so bad to give up to actually take any of the interesting talents that you can sometimes take. So that is still a class tree that I would describe as very high on the priority list for further work, I'd say. Keeper of the Grove is getting buffed for both Balance and Resto, and Balance is getting buffs as well to a lot of their damage abilities. Flat Aura buff combined with buffs to certain abilities. A few more than others, but mostly about 10-15% for all the abilities mentioned here. I know there's been a lot of talk about Balance recently from the Balance content creator community about the problems with it. I don't know. This doesn't seem like the kind of changes that would really, help the class with design level problems. Sometimes that can happen when you buff or nerf damage of, say, spenders relative to builders, but I don't think anything here looks like it's really doing that kind of, like, that's the sort of thing where if you see something like, Star Surge buffed by 50% or nerfed by 50%, something like that can be enough to really change the identity of a spec. But if you're just kind of flat buffing everything, the spec's going to play pretty much the same as it used to. Obviously, some of this is 20%, some is 10%, but for the most part, it's all pretty similar numbers here. Hunter. So we have some more moderate changes to Hunter here. There's a new talent, Blackrock Munitions, that gives you more explosive shot damage. There's a new talent as well, Implosive Trap, which is basically knock-up trap. So it's sort of like that Shaman talent that lets you have Thunderstorm knock up instead of knock away. Territorial Instinct's been redesigned to let Intimidate without an active pet summon one from your stable. Some talents have been repositioned. And Steel Trap and Death Chakram have been removed. One of the biggest complaints for Death Chakram in particular, I guess the reason they've done this is for button bloat, because it was a relatively high frequency button you had to click before all of your damage abilities, creating something of a launch sequence for every Hunter spec. Its removal will let us bake the lost power into each spec's kit, while also reducing the button presses required before you can begin damage. I think this is definitely a good button to target with this. BM, some stuff's been moved and sound effects have changed. MM, Arcane Shot 3% buff, Small Game Hunter nerf, multi-shot focus cost nerf. A bug has been fixed that is nerf that was making multi-shot do too much damage, so this is a nerf basically. And some functionality has been correctly added to make Wailing Arrow and Rapid Fire generate wind arrows. So basically some AoE nerfs here to MM, which MM was doing some sick AoE on the last build. Not surprised to see this. Serve. Okay, a lot of stuff coming for Serve. Sickham's been redesigned. Kill Command has a 15% chance to give you a free kill shot that cleaves onto 2 additional targets, and this is doubled during Coordinated Assault. Coordinated Assault initial damage increased. I like this. I always like it when there are cooldowns that do a nice hit of upfront damage. It makes it feel less icky to spend the global starting your cooldowns. That was always, when they put everything on the GCD, not a lot of CDs had this functionality, and I think pretty early on I was beating the drum of like, make more CDs, do something up front, and I stand by that. I think that's made them a lot better. I think all the CDs that, do something fun when you press them right away are much better than the ones where it's like, this CD means that my next couple globals are going to be good. But, in and of itself, it's just one of many setup globals. So Coordinated Assault's also been redesigned. You and your pet charge an enemy, striking them for combined damage. You and your pet's bond is strengthened, causing you and your pet to deal 20% increased damage. While it's active, Kill Command's chance to reset is increased by 15%. Its previous iterations have been disproportionately complex relative to its output. Our goal is to simplify it, increase the power gain, and disjoint it from Killshot so you can opt into Killshot bonuses as you see fit. We also believe that increased Kill Command reset chance will be more broadly appealing with the new talents introduced in the Serve update. Symbiotic Adrenaline's been updated, additionally causes CA to grant 3 stacks of Tip of the Spear. Quickshot's been updated, now has a 30% chance to fire an arcane shot when you cast Kill Command, was when it reset. So this is just a buff as well, because you're also going to get this off of the naturally refreshing kill commands. Butchery 100%, that's a big number. Flanking Strike now replaces kill command after casting kill command 3 times. So you do 3 kill commands, and then your next kill command is a flanking strike. Its range is now 25 yards. It no longer benefits from tip. It generates 15 focus. And yeah, it will have, I guess, a charge component to it, presumably here as well. So I think that'll be interesting. Pretty cool. Definitely something you'll want to keep track of as the hunter. Flanker's Advantage no longer gains additional reset chance based on your crit. This effect also had a bug that was causing you to roll kill command resets twice per kill command, which was creating substantially increased resets. Mongoose Fury. So Mongoose Fury is changing. This used to be sort of a special kind of effect where you'd apply it, you'd get a stack, and then you'd get more stacks, but you wouldn't increase the duration. So you'd kind of try and ramp up and then spam while you still could, and then it would fall off, and then you'd do other stuff before you started your next Mongoose Fury window. That was at least the idea that it was kind of trying to sell. But as they've noted in this dev note, the previous design was rewarding you for pressing nothing but Mongoose Bite in your damage window, while the new tip of the spear is asking you to weave in kill commands. These two designs were pulling your rotation in two separate directions, and these adjustments should help to harmonize these two mechanics. This I do understand. It was a unique thing about Mongoose Bite, about how Mongoose Bite worked, but now you're basically just going to have 3 stacks, and you need to press it every 10 seconds. So it's sort of becoming just one of those maintenance buffs, and I don't generally like those too much. You know, stuff like the Shadow Drain Soul thing for AF, where you just need to make sure you press it at least once every 10 seconds to keep the stacks up. I tend to not find those to be super fun to play with, and I did like the old Mongoose Bite design, but it's definitely true that anything else going on in your rotation would always have tension with that. So I could see this. I see this as kind of sad, but maybe necessary thing to do. Then there have been some nerfs to Wildfire Infusion's chance and cooldown reduction, still making changes to its action economy and reducing how crowded it feels. Part of this is reducing the increased access of Wildfire Bomb from the various spec tree changes we've made, particularly through Infusion. Many effects that were consuming multiple stacks of tip have been fixed. Spearhead now only makes your pet charge. Its visuals, description, and sound effects have also been updated. All right, on to Mage. First up, we have Spellslinger. They're also going to let you move faster during Evocate if you have Spellsling talented. There's also an issue that they fixed where you overcapped and that caused Splinter Storm to lower his threshold. And finally, Frost Splinter is now scaled with Frost Mastery. Definitely a big deal there. Sun Fury, they are nerfing mostly for fire, like they're nerfing the Spellfire Sphere and Lingering Embers damage bonus for fire mages. They're also making it so Lingering Embers no longer has a stack limit. They're also nerfing, again, these are just fire mage side of things, Burden of Power and Memory of Alar. Just the fire versions of this are getting nerfed for Sun Fury. Okay, Arcane. That's right. It's another week. It's another Mage rework week. Arcane has a bunch of new talents here. They've also moved a bunch of talents. So let's read some of these new talents. Consortium's Bauble. Reduces Arcane Blast cost, not cast time, rather. Cost by 3% and damage increased by 3%. Okay, so very basic. This is one of those sort of like mandatory-ish talents, right? Like you see this, you're going to take it. These are one of the ones they kind of put to glue the tree together that is just in every build. Resonant Orbs, Arcane Orb damage increased by 10%. Dematerialize, spells empowered by Nether Precision cause their target to suffer an additional 8% of damage over 6 seconds. Energy Reconstruction, damage from Dematerialize, has a small chance to make a 50% effective arcane explosion at the target's location. They don't generate arcane charges. Big Brained, a good talent. One that maybe most mages shouldn't be allowed to legally click. Gaining Clear Casting increases your intellect by 1% for 8 seconds. Multiple instances may overlap. So these are Iron Furs. This is not like old Mongoose Bites. This is just Iron Furs. Like you might have 3 stacks, then it goes back down to 2 type thing. Static Cloud, each time your Arcane Explosion, its damage increases by 25%. Bonus resets upon reaching 100% damage. Cool. High Voltage, damage from missiles, has a 20% chance to grant you a charge. The chance is increased by 5% each time this fails. So Arcane Missiles actually has a lot of damage instances here, is the thing. Like, if you press Arcane Missiles, I don't know how many damage instances it comes with, but I think it comes with, like, 6 or something more if you have the current set bonus that's being baked into the talent tree as well, and it's cleaving. So I could see this meaning that Arcane Missiles is, like, expected amount of charges is, like, 2 per cast or something, maybe, which is kind of wild if true. Maybe I'm misthinking about this, but it seems like, 20, 25, 30... 35 proc 20 25 30 35 40 or whatever, if you're rolling all those chances, like that's adding up to a lot of percent real quick. Arcane Blast damage being buffed. Clear Casting's proc chance is being nerfed. It's currently too easy to acquire more stacks so you know what to do with. We're going to continue to watch its proc rates and adjust accordingly. It now uses bad luck protection instead of true randomness. That's probably really nice for the specs feel, actually, because it definitely feels really bad to go like Clear Casting, getting 1 Clear Casting per 10 seconds versus getting, say, 3 in one 10-second window and then 0 for the next 20 seconds it's much better to get them smoothed out for the spec. at least for how it feels for me. I don't know if it's better for damage, but I feel that feels a lot nicer. So I think this is going to be a nice change. And then they're nerfing improved arcane missiles and crackling energy as well. Okay. I love arcane. Arcane's cool. Cool changes. These seem interesting. And yeah, high voltage seems potentially bonkers. I'm not sure. Fire. Pyromaniac proc chance reduced. Improved scorch damage bonus increased. Pyromaniac and Pyroblast and Flame Strike now echo at 50% effectiveness was 100. Molten Fury is being nerfed. So a little bit of nerfs and buffs to some of these different abilities. They're cleaning up the Living Bomb talents as well. The goal is to increase the appeal of the Gate 3 Living Bomb talents. We still expect Living Bomb to be fairly appealing in single target and low cleave situations, since the damage decrease in low target context is marginal, and we'll be watching it closely. So they've refactored its implementation. Many bugs have been fixed. It now applies Ignite. It spreads to fewer targets. So they're trying to nerf it looks like, in big AoE without nerfing it too much in small AoE and single target. The wording of many Lit Fuse proc chance increase talents has been changed. It has a higher chance to proc, but it now applies 1 Living Bomb was 3. Explosivo now increases Living Bomb's damage by 50% under combustion, and the chance of gaining Lit Fuse is increased by 30% under combustion. Blast Zone now makes Lit Fuse turn up to 3 targets into Living Bombs, and Living Bomb can spread, so Blast Zone makes it like old, it reverts these changes basically. Explosive Ingenuity increases Living Bomb's damage by a little bit less, or by a lot less. Sparking Cinders now separately increases Power Blast and Flame Strike's damage, now 10 and 20% respectively. This is nice. This gives them an extra tuning knob to buff or nerf like Flame Strike versus Ignite AoE. And it now triggers 2 times per minute, scaling with haste was 3, so nerfing Sparking Cinders there as well. Finally, Frost. We have a small set of changes to Frost. Death Shield's been updated. While Veins is active, damaging an enemy with Frostbolt increases spell damage by 2%, stacks up to 10 times. We're increasing the ramp and giving it a stack limit, so you can comfortably switch off of Frostbolt after reaching max stacks. Fractured Frost has been updated. While Veins is active, your Frostbolts hit 2 additional targets and deal 15% increased damage, and Ice Lance damage has been buffed. All right, one of the shorter Mage sections for one of these videos. Let's move on to Monk. So Shadowpan, they're nerfing Shadowpan, making the damage required to accumulate a Flurry Charge more. We're happy with the change to attack power as the primary driver for Flurry Charge generation, but the current tuning was generating charges too quickly and leaving little room for skilled players to differentiate themselves. We will continue to keep a close eye on this and appreciate your feedback. My understanding was that this was already one of the weaker of the two for Windwalker, but I could be wrong about that. That's just what I had heard. So yeah, I mean, this is just, it's weird. It's weird to, basically the way it works is that as your attack power goes up, you now need to do more damage to accumulate Flurry Charges. So unlike most hero talent trees, as you go later into the expansion, in most cases, it's like, oh, I have more haste, I'm doing this thing more often. Whereas with Shadowpan, it's like, oh, I have more attack power, I'm doing more damage, but I need to do more damage to accumulate a Flurry Charge, therefore I'm doing this thing the same amount. That seems a little bit strange to me. I kind of feel like it should be instead, maybe tuned to be something that you're not doing too often at the start of the expansion, and then you do get to do it more often as the expansion goes on and you're doing more damage. Not 100% sure on that, though. I guess this is kind of integral to how it's designed, is that it is a pretty flat amount of triggering. They've removed Fundamental Observation for Brewmaster, and they fixed a Mistweaver bug as well. All right, Paladin. Lightsmith. So Lightsmith is another one of those hero talent trees that I think is pretty high on the I wish this was reworked list. They're not doing that here, though. Instead, what they're doing is making it do big damn. They're making Sacred Weapons do way more damage, way more healing, Divine Guidance way more damage and healing, Hammer and Anvil way more damage and healing. Now, my understanding on beta right now is that this was enough to make Lightsmith massively, massively OP. So people will play it if it launches doing the most damage for sure. But I kind of think that if they're not going to rework it, I'd kind of rather have it not do much damage so that I don't play it, and I'd instead play Templar or Herald, because those look much more fun to me, but that's just my take. Templar, Ret and Prot. So Sacrosanct Crusade has been redesigned. Eye of Tyr and Wake of Ashes surround you with a holy barrier for some of your max HP. Hammer of Light heals you as well, increase for each target hit, and any overhealing gets converted into a holy barrier instead. And an issue has been fixed with free Hammer of Light's consuming Divine Purpose as well. Okay, we also have some changes coming into Holy Paladin. There's a new talent, Extrication. Word of Glory and Light at Dawn gain up to 30% additional chance to crit based on target's current health. Lower health targets are more likely to be crit. This is actually a pretty cool way to, if you're spot healing somebody and they're at 60% health, they probably don't need a Word of Glory crit. But if they're at 20% health, they probably do. So that's kind of a cool way of doing this. Although, you know, I could see it being annoying as well, potentially, to play around. Liberation, on the other hand, says Word of Glory and Light of Dawn have a chance equal to your haste to reduce the cost of your next Holy Light, Crusader Strike, or Judgment. Interesting. Interesting type of effect there. It's rare to see things have chances equal to your haste. Haste is an interesting stat for healers as well because it tends to speed up your rotation and therefore speed up your rate of mana consumption. So this is a mana talent that scales with haste, which I guess is probably the stat that you would maybe have if you're having mana issues. Although on the other hand, if you're having mana issues, one of the things you might do is re-enchant and regem to have a less haste-focused build, and then this mana talent becomes less good. New talent, Truth Prevails. Judgment heals you, and its mana cost is reduced by 30%. 50% of overhealing from this effect is transferred onto 2 allies within 40 yards. Nice. Free, press Judgment and heal yourself, heal your friends. I imagine that'll be nice for, especially for like farm situations, just Judgment doing a lot of your healing. Could be fun. Glistening Radiance has been redesigned. Spending Holy Power has a 25 chance to trigger Saved by the Light's Absorb effect at 30% effectiveness without activating its cooldown. Light's Protection has been redesigned. Allies with Beacon receive less damage. That's really nice. Overflowing Light's been redesigned. 15% of Holy Shock's overhealing is converted into an Absorb Shield. The amount cannot exceed 10% of your max health. Rising Sunlight's been redesigned. After casting Avenging Wrath, your next 2 Holy Shocks cast 2 additional times. After casting Divine Toll, your next 2 Holy Shocks cast 2 additional times. Glorious Dawn's been redesigned. Holy Shock has a 12% chance to refund a charge when cast, and its healing is increased by 10%. When cast here, I assume means it's not if you get free ones out of stuff. Several talent locations have been moved, and there's a big one. Glimmer of Light and Daybreak are both gone. So big swing at reworking the Holy Paladin playstyle. I have not played much Holy in quite a long time, so I don't really feel qualified to speak much on this, but I am curious to see how it works. I know Glimmer of Light's been a pretty polarizing talent within the Holy Paladins I know. Some of them are like, yeah, this is really fun. I like Holy Paladin. I've liked it ever since they added Glimmer. And others have been like, you're stupid. Glimmer is stupid. I'm playing Holy Paladin, but I had more fun before Glimmer existed. So we'll see maybe whether Blizzard will thread the needle and find some new version of Holy Paladin that satisfies both camps. Ret. So there was briefly a change that has been crossed out here regarding Divine Wrath, and the new change is just Divine Wrath no longer extends the duration of Radiant Glory. So I guess it was originally going to do it separately, and now it's just not going to affect Radiant Glory. It's only going to affect base Wings and Crusade. Vanguard of Justice has been updated. Enemies hit by other Holy Power spending abilities take 30% increased damage from your next Divine Storm, stacking up to 3 or 5 times. It's a 2-point talent. Interesting effect here in that the 1-point version of this doesn't reduce the damage taken or done per stack. It just gives you fewer stacks. So if you wanted to press Divine Storm, once every 3 Templar's Verdicts, you actually don't get any value out of the second point in this node. That's a very interesting way to make a 2-point node. Judge, Jury, and Executioner has been updated. Holy Power generating abilities have a 15% chance to cause your next verdict to hit 3 enemies, additional 3 enemies at 100% effectiveness, and it was triggering from Divine Storm and was a 40% chance. Okay. So yeah, now this is going to be on generators, whereas Vanguard of Justice is still mostly... So Vanguard of Justice is pretty similar. This one is still going to proc off of mostly Templar's Verdict or Final Verdict or whatever. But Judge, Jury, and Executioner is now going to proc on your builders to make your next verdict cleave, which of course then is going to feed back into Vanguard of Justice. Definitely a pretty cool, like, prio damage for free while you're AoEing, AoE damage for free while you're prioing type setup here. Judge, Jury, and Executioner no longer highlights verdicts, but instead has a UI overlay. Templar / damage over time debuff is no longer displayed in personal nameplates. All right, Priest. We've got a small change to Oracle here. They are buffing preventative measures to now also increase damage dealt by Penance, Holy Fire, Smite, and Holy Nova. Rogue. Okay, big changes to Rogue here. Deathstalker getting another pass here. Flensing Knives has been removed and is being replaced by Fatal Intent, which says your damaging abilities against enemies above 20% health have a very high chance to apply Fatal Intent. When an enemy falls below 20% health, Fatal Intent inflicts plague damage per stack. So we've seen this effect twice before. This is an arms talent, I think called like Fatal Mark or Death Mark or something like that. And there's also was a trinket back in Ajar's Eternal Palace that had this effect. This is definitely pretty powerful. Having this be 20% as well, rather than say 30, 35%, like we've seen on previous iterations of this effect, is fundamentally more powerful in almost all cases as well. Except if you have a boss that dies at 30%, then it's a lot worse. But other than that, it's a better version of this effect. And yeah, if this does a lot of damage, this will be a very powerful, piece of execute damage in the Deathstalker build, which is very strong type of damage for a lot of important boss fights. Deathstalker's mark has been updated as well. It can no longer be reapplied if the target has a mark. Its duration has been buffed. It now again applies 3 stacks, was 2. They've changed this a couple times. Plague damage has been increased on consuming it, and next ability damage has also been increased on consuming it. They also fixed an issue causing eviscerates and envenoms empowered by Darkest Night to deal less damage than intended, and it's now granted to the rogue when a target with Deathstalker's mark dies. Nice. This seems like it's going to make this hero talent tree a lot nicer. This is definitely one of the hero talent trees that I think had a lot of bad stuff, but I wonder if this is enough to now. I wonder if this has fixed the majority of the, jankiness with the old version of this, the clunkiness, as it were. All right, Fatebound. This one, we've also got updates to Hand of Fate. Streak buffs now have a duration of 15 seconds, was unlimited. Head's buff now increases damage by 3%, was 5, plus 1 per stack. Tail's base damage has been buffed, but it now gets less damage per stack. Fateful Ending has had the following updates. Lucky Coin buff now increases agility by 7%, was all primary, secondary, and tertiaries by 1%. Its out of combat timer has been increased to 15 seconds, was 10, and it now deals cosmic damage of 170% of Tails' base damage to your target if you already have the Lucky Coin buff upon flipping the same face for the 7th time in a row. And then finally, Fate Intertwined duplicates a bit more damage as well. Interesting. I wanted to actually play some Fatebound Outlaw, but I haven't yet done that, so I wonder how this is going to feel. This is definitely an interesting spec that seemed cool, but also potentially very obnoxious to play with, and depending on the context. So I wonder what this does. Let me know in the comments if you're a rogue how this has been playing out. Shaman. Okay, so Shaman. I know it looks bad, Shaman. I know it's looking bad out there, but they have said that they, over the first few weeks of testing, they've got a lot of feedback. They aligned their feedback with the design goals and got to work. They've been working through a package of updates, and we can confirm we'll have the majority of the changes implemented and ready for testing in the next beta build next week. Before then, we intend to deploy some beta tuning hotfixes the next couple days, but this tuning is not a part of the package coming next week. So it's coming, Shamans. They haven't forgotten about you. They've been working. They've been cooking behind the scenes. It's going to be tough. They're eventually going to actually put some Shaman changes in there, and my memes are going to have to end on Shaman. But this week, at least, we do only have one change, which is for Totemic. Surging Totem is now cast at a destination within 40 yards. For Enhance, it creates tremors around itself every 6 seconds for duration. And for Resto, it maintains Healing Rain around itself for 24 seconds. And you can move it with Totemic Projection, and it will always be the central totem. So wherever you click Totemic Projection, the center of the reticle will be where the Surging Totem always goes to. This seems cool. One of the big pain points for me, I played some Totemic Resto Shaman, was that the healing rains that it would put would be in kind of awkward places, and particularly if you were trying to get damage out of Acid Rain, it wouldn't always be very easy to get that onto the mobs in a pull. So this is definitely a lot nicer, I think. It does mean that you're no longer just going to press it and have it do its whole thing. You're instead going to either need to press it and then click where you want it to go, or use an @cursor macro, or use an @player macro. That's probably the worst option of those for min-maxing, but I'll probably be using an @cursor macro for dropping this. And then you'll also, want to talent and use Totemic Projection probably as well for Resto. For Enhance, I'm not too sure about how this functions. I haven't played Totemic Enhance really, but that's my take on it for Resto. So this seems like a nice change there. All right, Warlock. We have some Soul Harvester changes coming in here. They've redesigned Shadow of Death. Your demonic soul lures lost spirits to you, granting you a succulent soul every 30 seconds in combat. In addition, your soul empowers your Soul Rot and Demonic Tyrant, causing it to grant 2 succulent souls when cast. Satiel's Ambition has been renamed to Wicked Reaping, and Mantle of the Harvester has been renamed to Satiel's Volition. Affliction, they buffed the chance for Ravenous Afflictions to activate, and Destro, Infernal now paths to Eradication and Reverse Entropy / Internal Combustion. Warrior, Blood and Thunder's been removed. Thunderclap will now apply Rend by default if it is known. +1 talent point. +1 talent point for Prod at least. Crackling Thunder no longer increases Thunderclap's damage. Champion's Might now causes you to deal 25% increased crit damage to targets chained to your spear. This crit damage bonus is now additive instead of multiplicative, matching other similar effects. Piercing Challenge now increases all damage dealt by Champion Spear, was only initial damage. Uproar gives you more cooldown reduction on Thunderous Roar. Fix an issue that caused Rallying Cry to increase maximum health by 15% instead of the intended 10%. This still needs to do more in keys. This still needs that treatment of being 400% more effective, dropping down to this as you get to 20 players. We need that for Rally. Maybe not in PvP or whatever, but that would be really nice for keys. Hero Talents, Colossus. Revenge now generates a stack of Colossal Mites when it hits 3 or more targets. Nice. That's going to make it feel less stupid to be pressing. Like, there are spots where you'd press Revenge, but maybe you're thinking like, oh, I should just be, building to my next Demolish or speeding up my next Demolish and just press Shield Slam instead. So now you can instead feel confident in spending a global in Revenge in AoE situations. I like that. One change I'd really like to see for Colossus is I'd like to see Demolish come with like a 5-yard charge, because right now it's this button that you can press, but you can only press it if you're in melee of a target, and it feels kind of clunky. Like, you can press it outside of the range where you can press Thunderclap and hit stuff. I think if you're in range to Thunderclap and hit something, you should be able to hit Demolish, and it should either just have a bigger AoE and also hit that thing, or it should come with a little bit of a charge to it. Like, not the full Fearalath, 20-yard charge or anything like that, but just a little charge on it would make it feel a lot better, because when I've been playing Colossus Prot Warrior, I've been feeling times where I press it, expect it to go off, and it doesn't, because I'm like, my pinky toe is 2 feet away from where it needs to be for it to actually trigger. Mountain Thane. Keep your feet on the ground no longer increases your armor, and instead reduces phys damage taken by 2%. This is going to scale better as armor values go up over the expansion, so that's nice. Slayer. Opportunist now increases damage and crit damage of your next overpower by more. Arms. All ability damage 30%. Overpower damage increased by additional 20%. And Fury. They reverted this recent change, so anger management still going to be 1 second per 20. They changed this in the last build as well because they wanted to make recklessness uptime lower for Fury. But then I guess in this build, they thought about changing it back, and they were like, no, never mind. We don't want there to be too much recklessness uptime. But we are buffing all damage for Fury by 30% as well. Now, Fury and Arms were both doing augmentation of Ochre damage last week's beta build, so this is definitely welcome, 30% for them. Again, these are the kind of big swings that we are expecting at this time in the beta cycle, as classes get buffed and nerfed into being in the same ballpark as each other, and then we'll see the kind of more scalpel being brought out instead of the hammer. Okay, PvP, got some changes here. Honor can be transferred between characters at an 80% conversion rate. A bunch of changes to how effective things are in PvP as well. Some other changes as well to how crafting and sockets integrate with PvP. So there's a new item called Vicious Jeweler's setting that can be purchased at a cost of honor and bloodstones to put a socket in any piece of PvP gear that's eligible to have a socket, and rings and necklaces can have up to 2, like in PvE. But it's not compatible. The jewel crafting version of this socketer is not compatible with PvP equipment. We would like for the full journey, or the journey to full gems on PvP gear, to be meaningful but effort-gated rather than time-gated, and intend for the cost to be roughly comparable to the effort required were this still sourced from the Great Vault. Interesting change there. I'm not really a PvPer. Obviously we skip through a lot of these notes in these videos, but I do feel like this is an interesting thing to do, and further kind of puts the PvP and PvE gearing down 2 different tracks as well. Although I do wonder if getting 2 free sockets on some PvP rings, even at low item level, might not be... Well, I guess you get it for free for the jewel crafting thing. Like, they're not out of the vaults. Yeah, I'm not sure. Interesting. Okay, a couple other changes to crafting as well. So to changing how you get your PvP recipes through costing from honor or victory boxes, but at a much lower rate. There are sellable recipes as well. They're evergreen for the expansion, so you don't need to collect a new suite of recipes each season. That's nice. And previously optional reagents are now required that function similarly to the Spark. You can purchase them with Honor and Conquest just as before, and each recipe will still require a quantity equivalent in cost to what the vendor offers for that slot. Essentially, if you have the currency, you can choose to craft PvP gear. That makes sense? The starter set will remain BOE. The reagent used to craft it will drop in high quantities from victory boxes and is also tradable. You'll be able to purchase it with Honor as well, though at a slightly higher cost to Honor gear due to its tradability. And when we enter a new season, this set of reagents will no longer be attainable. Will be updated with new ones at higher item level, and as usual, you can recraft to those ones as well. We also have some changes to some raid rewards. The Treacherous Transmitter, which is one of the trinkets, has had the following updates. The effect has been reworked to be triggered on use with a 1-minute CD. Completing a random task at random times proved more disruptive than intended. Players now decide the optimal moment to continue working on their shadowy benefactor's behalf. Nothing bad ever happened from listening to the voices in darkness. Why stop now? Yeah, this was a trinket that it would basically give you a task from the ethereal cartel. So now you press this button when you're ready to get a task, I guess, rather than just having it proc sometimes. Mad Queen's Mandate has had the following updates. Now castable while moving. The periodic effect can now crit. And they fixed an issue where preventing the heal effect from triggering when the target was killed by the trinket. This had like a execute component to it as well. Skyterror's Corrosive Organ primary target periodic and splash damage effects may now crit. Always good to make stuff crit so that you don't randomly just get owned if you're a crit scaler. Swarmlord's Authority has had the following updates. Absorb amount damage and duration increased, damage decreased. Fix an issue that could cause the Absorb Shield to reach unintended values and affect client stability. Wow. Scarabs now properly grant Absorb value if they kill the target. Spymaster's Web Spying Spiders now grant int if the triggering spell killed the target. And Key to the Unseeming now grants haste and mastery, was crit, and verse. Okay, if you're interested, I have some videos earlier on this channel looking through what all these trinkets do. So if you want to see the old versions of those, you can check the backlog. I'm not gonna do that thing where I put the link in the top right because there's a couple different videos for these different trinkets at different times. So you go look through my old backlog of videos. Go find them. And then finally, we have some UI and accessibility changes, including the character select screen, which now displays up to 4 characters from your band at once. That's worked that way in beta so far, and they can be reordered. So this is just already how it worked. They're clickable and rotatable within the scene. Hovering will give you some info about the character. A search field has been added to easily find your characters. Nice. Artwork updates and clarity improvements have been made to game service menus. The number of character macro slots is increased to 30, was 18. Nice. And a map legend has been added to the main map next to the pin and filter options. Yeah, there's a couple of other changes as well that have been tweeted as well, such as being able to see your Mogs, your class-specific Mogs on any character. You can now do that from the Appearance tab as well, which is going to be really nice. And they've cleaned up a bunch of stuff in the world map. They've basically just been making the UI better, so it's going to be really nice. Everything's looking good. All right, that is it for this week's patch notes rundown video. Let me know what you think of all these changes. Shamans, let me know what you think of your big set of changes. No, it's going to be good. Shamans are going to be good. There's going to be a lot next week, maybe. Or maybe there'll be like 5 lines. I don't know. There's no way to be sure. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.